Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review on a brand new house called the House of 1984. Literally, that's what it's called. The House of 1984. Today we're going to talk about their more expensive of their two releases. They only have two. I believe more are going to be coming out in 2025, but so far they only have Ajna, which is the more expensive of the two, and Monochrome, which is the cheaper of the two. I actually really like them both. This is a Mark Buxton creation. For those of you who know your perfumer names, Mark Buxton's a big name. And so even their quote-unquote cheaper fragrance is really, really good. But today we're going to talk about their most expensive fragrance called Ajna. And since it's a new house, let me read the blurb. Sorry about the hair, by the way. Today is haircut day, so no product goes in the hair on haircut day. I guess I could have her wash it out beforehand, but it's too much work. So let me read you the blurb from the house of their, what they call a story to scent. So this is from the founder on his website. We at the House of 1984 are creators at heart. We dream big, wielding imagination and fresh ideas to turn even the wildest concepts into reality. They do have some wild concepts, I will tell you that. We believe in self-expression, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. We crave leaving a mark, a lasting impact on the world around us, but that's not all. There's a touch of magic in everything we do. We find beauty in bringing seemingly contradicting elements together, because that's where the true spark happens. We see ourselves as catalysts for change, turning possibilities into realities. We're like alchemists, using knowledge and creativity to transform visions into tangible things. Yet the magic wouldn't be complete without a healthy dose of adventure. We're seekers, dreamers, and builders, always on the lookout for new paths to a more authentic way of living. We crave the thrill of the unknown, the freedom of exploration. We love the journey itself, a life that pushes boundaries and embraces adventure. It's a long way to say a very little, in my opinion, but you get the idea of what they're going for. This I would say, like, in my opinion, they're a very Comme des Garçons-like aesthetic, you know? They've got some weird things in there. Like, there's a film note in here. There's a money note in Ajna, which we're going to be talking about. They use things that are off the beaten path and a little bit strange, and yet they make it work very much like Comme des Garçons, okay? And so there are 4 types of real oud in Ajna, and I think that's probably the reason it's as expensive as it is. But just from a very high-level overview, I would not put this brand into the level of the artisanal houses at the top notch. So I wouldn't put them up there with the Aris Ladores or the Ensar Ouds or the Sultan Pashas of the world. I wouldn't put them in that upper tier of artisanal houses that I've been discussing on the channel for years now. But I would say that the quality of the House of 1984 is better than your average designer you're going to find in Macy's or something like that. You know what I mean? That's my 2 cents on it. The other thing that really made me kind of sit up in my chair and pay very close attention, take notes, is the perfumer is a woman named Shatha Alzaabi. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the House of 1984 is a Middle Eastern house. I think they're either like from Dubai or something like that. I can't remember exactly. If I'm wrong, I do apologize. But I think they are a Middle Eastern house. But the perfumer that they chose for this one, and even Mark Buxton, both of these perfumers really made me kind of take notice, because Shatha Alzaabi was described to me before I ever smelled any of her work by a friend who I really, really trust. And the person said that he thinks of her as a female Russian Atom. And I went, okay, I'm very interested here. So this is a fragrance that really made me kind of think as I wore it. You know, this is like a thinking person's fragrance. The note listing is unique and strange and different, but it delivers the notes in a way where it really tells a story, you know? It makes you think deeper than just the actual notes listed. So I actually have about a 3-hour dry down here. So I'm not going to do a fresh spray because this is a very long fragrance. But let me read you the note listing, and then I'll talk about some of the examples of kind of what popped into my head as I wore this. This may be a little bit of a ramble because this is a off the beaten path type of fragrance. You know what I mean? So here's what the note listing is according to the brand. The top notes are juniper, pink pepper, and fresh printed dollars. The heart notes are cannabis, tolu balsam, vintage jasmine, and worn out dollars. And the base notes are Australian sandalwood, Indian Mysore sandalwood, cedarwood, tobacco, oud malinu, oud maruk, or maruki, oud Burmese, and oud from Laos. Okay, so 4 different types of ouds in the base. And, it's interesting because, as I said, there's this deeper connection with the fragrance when you wear it. So my brain, as I was wearing this, made me start thinking about not just like the dollars going from, let's say, freshly printed to crumpled up in your pocket, but imagine like the life cycle of a world reserve currency, going from fresh out of the gate strong. In America's case, it was right after World War II, and then over time kind of degrading and becoming more worn out. And when you look back at history, there's never been a reserve currency of the world that hasn't failed over the years. Failure rate historically is 100%. On a long enough timeline, the world reserve currency of whatever the world is using will be basically worthless, will go to zero or lose its, let's say, world reserve currency status, right? So whether it was the Spanish silver dollar, the Dutch guilder, the British pound sterling, there's a life cycle to empires, but also to the currencies that they use, right? And spread throughout the world. And so it's a cycle as old as time. You could go back. If you've ever heard the saying to debase a currency, you've ever heard an economist say, oh, we're debasing the currency. Well, that phrase actually goes all the way back to Roman times when they used real gold in their money, and they would literally debase the currency by putting a cheaper base metal into the gold. So it became, let's say, less and less percentage of gold and more percentage of some sort of cheaper metal, let's say. And so they literally poured cheaper base metals into the currency. They debased the currency. My brain was like going through this as I was wearing the fragrance because of the life cycle of the dollar and the way that it's supposed to kind of smell as the fragrance continues on. So that's the kind of, thought process I mean while wearing this. This is a thinking person's fragrance to me. So obviously, in modern times, we don't have the problem of debasing the currency because we can just print, baby. Print some more. We have the magic printing press. But all life cycles play themselves out over these long timelines. So the reason that this whole life cycle of empires sort of comes to mind is that the opening, when you first spray Ajna, okay, you basically are hit with this very crisp dollar bill type smell. And as the fragrance continues on its journey, it becomes more of a worn out dollar bill. So imagine, sort of what goes through my head as I was wearing this is I imagine myself being back in college, going to the bar, giving the bartender money, and whenever she gives it back to me, after a couple drinks, do I put it in my pocket nice and neat? Do I take out my wallet and put it in there with all the other dollars? No, I just shove it into my pocket, with all the other crap that you'll find the next morning whenever you wake up, right? So no attention to care, no properly putting them back in the wallet, just shoved into my pocket as the bartender kind of hands me change, right? Which kind of dates me, as nowadays they don't even take cash. All the bars I've been to lately, only credit card or debit or something like that. But there's a big difference, at least in my mind, when you think about a freshly crispy, sort of freshly minted dollar straight off the printing press, if you will, and a dollar that's been circulated for many years. It is worn and torn and distressed and all of that stuff, right? So that is the life cycle of the scent. And this scent really kind of makes my brain wander down these pathways. Like, for example, you think about freshly minted dollars. Well, there's something in here when you first spray. There's something in here that has the sharpness of mint. There's no mint actually listed, but there's a note in here that kind of gives this almost strange, like, sort of freshness, if you will. And so, for example, in the top, you have this very crisp dollar, right? But when you describe a crisp opening in a fragrance, most people aren't thinking the crispness of money. They're not thinking that crisp feeling of having a dollar bill, right? They're thinking crisp in the sense of like fresh and uplifting. They're thinking something that actually smells crisp, right? So you get that to a degree here. And the opening sort of has this like crispness of biting into an apple, or a fruit that has that crisp crunch, but imagine it without the apple smell. Although it's interesting because you could make a case that even from the get-go, even when you first spray the fragrance, there are these notes that are sort of like floating up from the base, they're rising up from the base. And those notes rising up from the base are parts of the fruity oud that you get even early on. So the oud is all base notes here, as proper oud should be, because it's one of the heaviest and longest lasting materials in the scent. And I probably wouldn't guess apple if you sort of twisted my arm. Although it's possible there are some apple or some pear touches here or something like that. Probably I would guess that you get more like berries, and I was thinking of the little circles here, even little circular berry, raspberry, blueberry, looking marketing material on the bottle. That's just, again, a crazy hypothesis on my part. But if you actually go to the website, you'll notice that floating around the bottle on their imagery is like blueberries and pink pepper. And obviously there's no blueberries. Usually that type of note comes from the oud itself. And so if you can just imagine the freshness of biting into that very crisp apple, mixing with the sharpness of juniper. And I think juniper plays a very big role in this opening because it almost has this like gin-like aspect to it. And while juniper can have many facets here, it is dosed in a way that allows lots of them to sort of reveal itself, okay? So sometimes this juniper can smell slightly citrusy. Sometimes it can be fresh. Sometimes it can have this almost cooling aspect. Like, that's probably where that mintiness is coming from, my guess, is this overdose of juniper, which adds some of that sort of spicy, cooling aspect. And again, you think of freshly minted dollars, and this fragrance takes you down all these very strange sort of pathways, The pink pepper adds a very slight designer touch to an otherwise very out there and artistic and strange fragrance, Kind of in the same way where Comme des Garçons can have very wearable designer aspects to it, but very strange aspects, like, the smell of a garage concrete floor or something like that. Comme des Garçons does stuff like that all the time. This is kind of what I associate with the House of 1984. The pink pepper is used in a way in the top that will remind you of some of the easier to wear designer scents, but then you have the strangeness of the freshly minted dollars turning into worn out dollars, the oud in the base, all that stuff. So the uniqueness mixed with some easier to wear aspects, let's say that rosy pink pepper in the top, okay? Now, I know I mentioned gin earlier while discussing juniper, but about an hour to an hour and a half in, and I'm getting it even now, three plus hours in, this cannabis note starts to make itself known. So it's clear this gentleman is much more interested in partaking in other substances than just, let's say, gin at the bar. Now, I am a little torn on weed in my perfume. I reviewed some fragrances on the channel. For example, I reviewed a fragrance from the House of Prin called Ganja Kasturi. And Ganja Kasturi is so realistic of a weed smell to me that I would almost be afraid to wear it and then go get in the car and drive. Because if a cop pulls you over while you're wearing that, they're going to think you are straight up toking in the car or something. So, could you imagine the look the officer would give you if you're like, no, officer, it's my perfume, I swear. I actually got pulled over yesterday by a cop. Got a speeding ticket, 13 miles over, $232.50 for 13 miles over. Such a money grab, but whatever. Either way, I'm a little torn on weed in my fragrances because I don't like this very super realistic smelling weed note in there. However, there have been some fragrances lately that I've been discussing on the channel that use a cannabis note in a way that I actually really like. Forbidden Flower, I reviewed that from Maryse Ladore. That uses a hemp note or hemp flower. Kinski by Kinski, which I will be reviewing soon. That's one of my favorite celebrity fragrances of all time. That uses an amazing cannabis note. And probably the best Giza Schoen creation as far as I'm concerned. And then finally now we're talking about Ajna. And Ajna, the cannabis note reminds me of going back to that image of the boy shoving money in his pocket. Not me, of course, because I never partook in any illegal substances, but let's just have this imaginary boy who is at the bar, gets money back from the bartender, shoves it in his pocket, and then forgets that he had some sort of like a dime bag or something in his pocket, and the money starts mixing with that weed smell in his pocket. The crinkled up ball of money just gets this earthy green, sort of slightly funky, skunky, slightly animalic marijuana type smell, But by this point, the ouds are also mixing in. And so the ouds are beginning to come in heavier. You start to get some of that lacquered element that you get from, from many different types of ouds, like you're staining a deck or something like that. And, if you can imagine sort of the ouds and the weed doing like a 1-2 punch on the dollar bill, okay? Smell. There are so many different points along this fragrance where it really makes me think. And I really like that about this scent. It takes your brain down these little avenues, these little curveballs. And I started thinking, is the weed and tobacco, which we will get to in just a little bit, more to come on the tobacco front, but maybe the reason his money is now dirty from being clean is that the person went down a bad path, started smoking, started, getting off the straight and narrow path that got him the freshly printed money in the first place, and the scent really gets the old brain cells firing. You can go down all these different little avenues with this. But also in there, once you hit the mid, you get the cannabis, but you also get this very vintage smelling jasmine, if you will. And the vintage jasmine adds these sort of like powdery floral aspects to it. But for the most part here, the jasmine adds this sort of fresh sharpness that something like jasmine sambac might add. I don't know what type of jasmine this is, but I don't get the big honeyed, sort of rolling floral aspect you get from Jasmine grandiflorum. The Jasmine sambac acts more like a bridge into the dry down. So it's connecting the top and the base where that quartet of oud basically awaits. Now, there's also a little bit of Tolu balsam in here, and that adds this ambery warmth, to the fragrance profile. So the fragrance profile has that sort of sharpness from the opening, that freshly minted dollar opening, and then going into the dry down, that's where you get some of the cannabis, the bridge with the vintage jasmine, the Tolu balsam makes it slightly ambery, and then all of this sets up the 4 ouds in the base, the quartet of ouds in the base, if you will. And these 4 rare types of ouds are oud from Laos, oud Malinao, oud Maruki, and Burmese oud, okay? So according to the founder, it's interesting because the ouds in the base, he said that they can be representative of, like, let's say ambition, okay? Which if you think about it, it makes sense because ouds are rare, they're sought after, they're expensive, they're not something that everybody has, it's something you have to kind of search out. You maybe have to understand different types of ouds, and so there is a ambition aspect to it, and then you tie it all back into money. Well, many people want money for different reasons. You could want money because you want the opposite sex to like you. You could want money because you want to have a lot of cool toys. You want to have awesome cars to drive and, amazing motorcycles and private jets and all this stuff to show off, to look cool to your friends, and also probably to the opposite sex. You could want money so you could just be lazy. So you don't have to work. You can just sit around and vacation and all this stuff, right? You can do whatever you want to do. But there's many, many stories out there in time, again, going back forever, of men and women who win the lottery and it absolutely ruins their life. It sort of, in a way, takes a life that was crisp and clean and makes it dirty, bashes all their hopes and dreams, Many people with more money than God are miserable. Money will not necessarily make you happy, right? And that image of the fragrance as you're wearing it, the dollar bills going from crisp to sort of dirty, almost like stained in a way, tarred. It's a powerful one. It's a powerful image. In a way, we're all slaves to the monetary system that we're born into. We're held servitude to it. It's a system that you can't just opt out of. I mean, you could, but you would have to go live on a track in the middle of nowhere and just and grow your own food, and not Amazon won't be able to show up at your door. You won't be able to go to Walmart, that kind of thing, right? And so this servitude to the system, this sort of money going from clean to dirty, could also sort of symbolize that that lust of power and wealth, right? And so the dry down brings in these very interesting ouds, which add this sort of the rare note, the expensive note of real oud to a fragrance. But it also brings in the note of tobacco, which I absolutely love. And here the tobacco is very mature. If you can imagine, like James Bond in one of the Sean Connery films, like tapping his cigarette before he puts it in his mouth and lights it in the coolest way possible, there is a little bit of that air to it, that maturity. Tobacco adds a masculine maturity to the fragrance. That's why I say I think this fragrance is completely unisex, but I think it does lean masculine because of the ouds and because of the tobacco, especially. And so it's not so deep and rich that it sort of overtakes the entire scent, though, and it comes later into the dry down. So we're talking 3+ hours in is where you're really going to start to notice the tobacco. And it blends very well with that cannabis note as well. So in the base, they list Australian and Indian Mysore sandalwood, according to the brand. I don't know if what type of, sandalwood, Mysore sandalwood. Well, they say Mysore, so if they say it, we'll go with it. But I can't necessarily pick out, let's say, a Mysore smell in the same way that I could when I did a review of, let's say, Aries Ladore's Al Sandal. I can't do it. It's not there for me. I don't necessarily get that Mysore sandalwood DNA, although it can be very faint, and sometimes some of the other fragrances can sort of overpower it. The fragrance profile can overpower it, if you will, if they're not careful with how they use it. So even though they list it, I don't really get it. But there's definitely, let's say, a woody scent into the dry down. It's probably the cheaper cedar wood, to be honest with you, but you do get a lot of the oud. The oud carries the scent into the dry down. It's not a super animalic oud, though, I will say that. And the ouds here are sort of in the middle, They're not the top of the line, at least to my nose. They're not up there with the NSARs and stuff like that. But they're much better quality than what you're going to get just at your local mall type fragrance. Your local designers. They're in the middle, okay? I would have liked for the ouds to be maybe have a little bit more of that oomph, but I think that would mess up the balancing act of the designer element, like I said in the top, with the rosy pink pepper being used, making it a little bit designery, and then sort of the strangeness going on. It would mess it up if they went too far into that artisanal space, right? I think they're trying to walk that balance, and they do a very good job of doing it. So here's what I will say. I like the scent. Excuse me. I definitely like the fact that it makes me think, going down all these different avenues, from the monetary system as a whole to, let's say, one person's life and the way money interacts with that person's life, and how it can, change the way that a person may act. And so I like all of the different little side paths, the thinking man's fragrance, if you will. And I would definitely make it a point to smell more work from this perfumer. I really like what I'm smelling so far from her, Shatha Alzaabi. So a very good first fragrance from her. I'll try to seek out more. She does a lot of work for a house called SJA. I don't know if that's her house or what. But I would definitely like to smell more of her work as time goes on. The quality of the ingredients is good. So maybe not the absolute best, but the quality of the ingredients is good. And, like I said, I'm going to make it a point to try to smell more of what this perfumer has done. And very unique choice of notes, okay? In the ability to take these notes and generate them into a story and kind of make me think about everything. I enjoyed that a lot. And I've probably worn this, I would say 4 or 5 times. This is probably my 5th time wearing this. So I have some pretty decent amount of experience with it. You can see I put a little bit of a dent. It's in the bottle. It's a 30 ml bottle. So let's talk about that, because so you get 30 mils. And the price, this is where I think a lot of people are going to jump off the bandwagon, is $425 for 30 mils, which is a tall ass. Now, price is obviously subjective. $425 to one person may mean nothing. To another person, it may be everything, And so it seems, unfortunately, more and more of these fragrance houses are going into this direction, where the asking prices continue to go up, and I don't see that changing, unfortunately. I wish it would change, but I just see this trend continuing. Hopefully there is, well, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of combat that. You can vote with your dollars, and for me, it is a tall ask for 30 mils. Maybe if it was 50 mils or something like that, you get a little bit more juice. 30 mils, it's a pretty tall ask. If you just took the price out of it and just focused on the fragrance, I like what I'm smelling. I like the storytelling. I like the ingredients. I like all of these different things I mentioned. But you can't look at it in a vacuum, because for $425 you could get a lot of other fragrances, you know? And so that's sort of the issue. Is it worth that money? And that's subjective. For me, $425 for 30 mils is a lot. It's a big ask. And it seems everything is going that way. This standard run-of-the-mill operating procedure of these companies where price just continues to keep going up. But it is what it is. As I said, price is subjective. We could talk about it for hours. But let's close by reading sort of a blurb from the brand. So here's what they say about this fragrance in particular, Ajna. So first of all, it's an X-ray, by the way. So you do get an X-ray concentration, 30 mils. And it says, a tribute to oud and most things spiritual. Ajna is the essence of light and illumination. Within you lies a wisdom, a light that can brighten your path. The journey begins with the sharp, invigorating scent of juniper mingled with the crisp, clean aroma of freshly printed dollars. This evokes memories of new beginnings, the excitement of potential and promise. As you move forward, the dollars become worn and faded, much like the beloved memories of youth that, over time, grow soft and sepia-toned. This transition speaks to the inevitable fading of everything materialistic. Again, all of these sort of images of money, materialism, like I was saying, the life cycle of empires and the monetary system, all this comes to mind. Then, the delicate fragrance of vintage jasmine leads the way, conjuring memories of summer nights and the soft whispers of a breeze through an open window. This guides you on a perfumed spiritual trip, awakening a sense of longing and introspection. The journey reaches its peak on a bed of oud, a rich blend of 4 types, Malinu, Moroccan, Laos, and Burmese oud. This rare foundation brings to mind memories of exotic travels, ancient forests, and hidden treasures. Grounding this base is an enchanting trio of sandalwoods. The vintage Mysore sandalwood with its creamy, warm aromas. I just wish I got it. I don't get it. Kindled the cherished heirlooms and the serenity of sacred spaces. The addition of cedarwood brings back memories of wooden chests filled with keepsakes, while the spicy essence of tobacco hints at quiet moments of reflection and the comforting embrace of nostalgia. So that's the blurb. Pros and cons. There's definitely pros and cons on both sides you could bring up. I didn't really show the packaging too much, but that is the bottle for Ajna. And they have a completely different bottle for Monochrome, which is interesting that they didn't go with a sort of cookie cutter bottle. Each one seems to be different so far, but very interesting house. Glad I got a chance to smell it and get to do a review for you guys. I wanted to review it last year whenever it came out, but alas, we're getting it knocked out in 2025. If anyone has experience with Ajna, I would love to hear your thoughts. As always, leave it in the comments. Even if you've never smelled it, do leave a comment. Just let me know you got a chance to watch the video. I do get a chance to respond to every single comment still. So if you leave a comment, you will get a response from me. So as always, I appreciate everyone watching, commenting, liking, subscribing, all the stuff you guys do that I never ask you to, but you do it anyways. Thank you very much. Hope you all are having a great start to 2025, and catch you next time. Bye-bye.